Shadow spiders. During the height of the pandemic shutdown, when almost no one was going anywhere, I was headed into work. My position had been deemed one of those essential personnel jobs that absolutely had to physically report to work every single day. It wasn't that my job was truly essential, because, to be honest, 85% of my workload could have been done from home. No, it was all because I had one of those old school bosses that simply didn't believe someone could effectively work from home. So, when Mondays came, and most everyone else I knew was sitting at home sipping coffee in their underwear, and logging into their video conference meetings, this essential employee was headed to his non-essential job in the city. When I reached the halfway point in my drive, where the road dips down between two groves of trees past a biochemical plant, something darted out in front of my car. I jerked the wheel hard to the left, trying my best to avoid hitting it. But I don't remember anything after that. Anything except the sounds of sirens blaring in my ears. Sometime later, I awoke to a world of utter darkness, and as the fog of drugs began to wear off, I remembered. The accident. I hit something. Someone. Wait, why can't I see? Something sticking in my arm. All right, an IV. From the sounds of beeping machines, and the distant muffled voices of doctors and nurses echoing out in the hallway, it was obvious I was in a hospital. Wait, but why can't I see? I quickly reached up to my face with my right hand. My eyes were covered, wrapped in some sort of heavy gauze, and there was a horrible burning sensation in my tear ducts. Nurse? Nurse? Someone? Help me! Help me! The call button. Where's the call button? Here it is. I fumbled around the bed for a moment, but before I could find the button, a woman rushed into the room. Mr. Collins, calm down. It's okay. I'm right here. Nurse? Nurse? Yes, I'm your nurse. My name is Brittany. What happened? My eyes. I can't see anything. I can't see. I'm afraid you were in a car accident, Mr. Collins. And some of the chemicals from the airbag exploded into your eyes. We've done everything we can at this point. Now, just the waiting to see if your eyes will heal. Waiting? What do you mean? Are you saying I might never see again? I wouldn't go that far just yet, Mr. Collins. Let's give your eyes a chance to heal before we start making those kind of statements. Okay? Her voice was soothing and helped to calm my shattered nerves. Yeah, sure. How long do you think, until we might know something? It could be several days or even a few weeks, but the doctors think they will be able to clean all the chemical out, and they feel confident that you should heal soon and even regain your sight. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Just give me just a moment, please. Of course, Mr. Collins. I sobbed quietly for a moment, and then I pulled myself together. I never thought it would be so terrifying, not being able to see. I'm just glad they were able to get to you in time. Listen, I don't want you to be alarmed, but we've had an outbreak here at the hospital, so we've been sending all the non-infected patients to the county fairgrounds. Oh, but, my eyes, my doctor, will someone be there to check on me? Yes, in fact, the doctor that performed the surgery on your eyes will be there with several other patients to make sure that they recover properly before being released, and he's going to be there to keep a close eye on you as well. Oh, thank goodness. Will I have a new nurse there, or will you... Brittany giggled softly, No, I'm afraid you're stuck with me for the long haul, Mr. Collins. I breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you. Call me Jack. And I'm happy to be stuck with you through this, Brittany. I can't tell you how terrifying it is to not be able to see. I could almost hear her blushing as she spoke back to me. Why, thank you, Jack. I'm glad to hear that. If I didn't know better, it almost sounds like you're blushing. Well, you're a very handsome man, Jack. I doubt if you saw me on the street that you would give me a second glance. Then I guess I'll get to see the real Brittany with my ears. And from the sound of things, I would say your beauty is greater than you realize. Jack, please. Now you are making me blush. I'm sorry. Hey, listen, I don't mean to be a complainer, but my head kind of burns a little. It feels strange. Oh, right. Some of the chemicals from the airbag got into your hair. We had to wash it out with a special cleanser before surgery so that you didn't get any more of the airbag chemical in your eyes while we worked. It might tingle a little bit for a while, but it should stop after some time. I will have to do another cleansing to make sure we get all the chemicals out of your hair, but we'll do that after we get to the fairgrounds, and that should take care of things for you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Brittany. You're very welcome, Jack. Listen, I'm going to give you a sedative so that you can rest during the move to the fairgrounds. Your eyes need to heal, and the stress isn't going to help your body do that properly. When you wake up, you'll be in a makeshift room in one of the agricultural buildings. You'll still have your call button, so if you need me, just give it a buzz and I'll come check on you. Thank you. I know it sounds cliche, but honestly, I can't thank you enough. I could hear her footsteps as she walked over to my bedside. Moments later, the IV in my arm jiggled, and something cold rushed into my veins, and I felt myself drifting off to sleep. When I woke at the fairgrounds, the sound of horrible groaning filled my room. At first I thought it might be coming from me because the meds were making my mind do flip-flops, and then I realized it was coming from someone in my room. Is someone here? Who is it? Are you okay? Nurse! Nurse! Brittany, are you... Suddenly, Brittany rushed into the room. She seemed somewhat shaken, a bit put off by my frightened tone. Jack, what is it? I heard groaning. Is someone in here with me? Yes, Jack, that's Mr. Crowley. He's your roommate. Oh, okay, well, I was worried. I didn't know that I would have a roommate here. You didn't mention that before. Look, I'm sorry, Jack, but we ran out of space. There was an accident at a biochemical plant, and there simply aren't enough rooms to keep everyone separated at the fairgrounds. We're doing everything we can, okay? We don't have time to deal with small complaints or... I'm sorry, Brittany. It's just that I don't know what's going on and not being able to see. It's very frightening. I'll try not to bother you much. But could you check on that guy and see if he's okay? He doesn't sound good. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean for that to come out that way. I'll check his vitals and... Suddenly she broke into tears. And from the muffled weeping, I imagined her hands were over her face as she cried. Hey, look, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm just a little uncomfortable. Not being able to see, it's terrifying, and I'm grateful for everything you're doing. You people are the real heroes in the world, and I reached out my hand for hers, and a few seconds later, I felt the soft, trembling touch of humanity. Even now, it's difficult for me to describe the way I felt at that moment. Peace, comfort, security. I didn't ever want her to let go of my hand. They say the blind are more in tune with their other senses, and now I believe it with all my heart. Every tiny line in her hand seemed to have its own story, and I couldn't wait to learn more about her. Brittany, you're trembling. Yeah, Jack, I'm sorry. It's just There's so much. It's horrible out there right now. I'd rather stay in here, but they need me. They need everyone they can get. Suddenly, one of the doctors barged into the room. Brittany, get out here right now. We need help holding this guy down. Yes, Dr. Larson. Right away, sir. Sorry, Jack. I'll check back on you as soon as I can. Yeah, sure, of course. No problem. And be safe out there, Brittany. Thanks, Jack. The door slammed behind her as Mr. Crowley continued to groan and gargle. Noises, screams, horror, and then silence filled the air outside my room. After a while, the room grew quiet. Even the sounds coming from outside the room quieted down. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different with Mr. Crowley. Mr. Crowley, are you okay? Mr. Crowley, are you there? A soft groan slipped out of Mr. Crowley's mouth. I hated to bother Brittany, but it'd been what felt like an hour since she had gone, and I just couldn't take the loneliness of darkness anymore. I mashed down on the call button and waited at least 10 minutes, counting each minute softly in the room just to hear the sound of someone else's voice, even if it was my own. 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. I stopped. I don't know why, but for some odd reason, I felt like someone was standing over my bed, breathing quietly next to my head. Mr. Crowley? Is that you? Are you next to my bed, Mr. Crowley? What are you doing? Speak! Speak, damn you, speak! I sobbed. Suddenly, a fury of overwhelming dread washed over me, and I mashed down on the call button like an addict desperately searching for a fix from Brittany's comforting hands. But no one came. Then fear took hold of me, like a chain of bondage wrapping around my entire soul. The vulnerability of losing my sight began to set in, and now, with Mr. Crowley's horrible breath rushing down on me, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. I needed to know. I needed to know the answer to the question that was eating away at me. Was I permanently blind? I psyched myself up mentally, let out a terrifying scream in Mr. Crowley's direction. Get away from me! Get away from me, you sick bastard! I quickly reached up to my face and violently tore the protective gauze from my eyes. My eyelids felt sticky and matted, so I lifted them up slowly, one at a time, but carefully, very carefully, so as not to damage anything. At first, everything was completely dark, but a few moments later, I began to see through the haze. My view of the world was now like staring into a dense gray fog that robbed every bit of clarity from my vision, except for what I looked at with such utter intensity that my eyes ached from the strain of it. Shadows now filled my world. Shadows of normal things that most people see with clear vision, even when there's not much light. But now, my life was filled with shadows everywhere. I opened and closed them several times, and soon I could make out shadowy representations of items in the room. I glanced to my left to see if Mr. Crowley was still standing next to my bed, but from what I could tell, he was not. I could see the shadowy form of his bed, but could neither tell if Mr. Crowley was sleeping in it or if it was empty. Everything was a giant gray blur, with heavier grays and lighter grays all around. With my hands held out in front of me, I made my way over to what looked like a computer stand with some blinking lights or something. It looked as if it might be 40 feet away, but when my hands suddenly bumped into it, after only a few steps, I realized that my depth perception was way off. The stand was on wheels, and I nearly tumbled over it when it moved. In the process, I jerked the plug out of the wall, and sparks popped from the outlet. Even though I couldn't see them, I knew the sound of electrical wires shorting out. I steadied myself for a moment. That's when I spotted a shadowy figure standing in the corner of my room. Mr. Crowley? Is that you, Mr. Crowley? I waited. No answer. Mr. Crowley? Answer me! What are you doing over there? Why are you standing there, Mr. Crowley? No answer came. The figure just stood there, silently, as if they were frozen into the wall, immovable, trapped in the darkness of the corner. Maybe my sight was off. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't really there. I decided to check Mr. Crowley's bed to see if it was empty. So, using the computer stand, I slowly wheeled myself over toward Mr. Crowley's bed and felt around with my hands. That's a foot. Legs. Mr. Crowley, is that you? Still, no answer. A slight hissing sound came from his mouth. Oh, please. Please, Mr. Crowley, just talk to me. My breath was stolen away from the fear that rushed over me. Reluctantly, I crept up slower toward the head of Mr. Crowley's bed and asked again, Mr. Crowley, are you okay? Mr. Crowley, I just want to know if you're okay. Something hissed again. With all my strength, I tried to focus on Mr. Crowley's face. It seemed motionless, but seemed to have something pulsing on the top of his head. I wondered if maybe it was some sort of tumor or injury. So I reached my hand out towards it, and suddenly it hissed. I jumped back in horror. In the process, fell to the floor, knocking the computer stand over with a loud crashing bang. That's when I heard the door open, and someone came back into the room. Brittany, is that you? I don't know what's going on. I think something's wrong with Mr. Crowley. Mr. Collins, why are you out of your bed? You need rest, Mr. Collins. Rest. Mr. Collins? What happened to calling me Jack? Yes, Mr. Jack. Let me help you back to your bed. Brittany reached down and took hold of my arm with such strength it stole my breath away. It sent a chill of horror down my spine. Ah! I cried out in pain. Such raw, terrifying strength from someone who only a moment ago had the gentle touch of an angel. It didn't seem right. It just didn't seem right. Sorry, Mr. Jack, but you need your rest. When she stood me to my feet, I could make out the shadow of her figure, but something was horribly strange about the top of her head. On the top of it was a round, pulsing, sack-like globe with 6 shiny gold dots in the center. Jutting out from each side were strange tentacles. 2 of them were holding on to the sides of her jaw, and there were 2 poking into her ears. Her eyes were wide open as if she was dead or maybe doped on drugs, and she stared mindlessly off into the abyss of darkness that clouded my sight. It was strange. I couldn't see almost anything in the room, but I could see this thing pulsing with such clarity. Brittany, you have something on your head. It's something strange. Why don't you let me take a look? I started to reach up towards the pulsing lump, and it suddenly reared back, letting go of her jaw momentarily to hiss at me. And then it quickly reached down and grabbed her jaw again with both tentacles and moved her mouth up and down to speak. Get back in your bed, Mr. Jack. Yes, I'm sorry, Brittany. Of course. Terrified, I stumbled over to my bed and crawled back in. pulling the covers up close to my neck. The mind-controlled Brittany was about to leave, but I just had to know. "Nurse, who's over in the corner over there?" "That is your doctor. He is keeping his eyes on you until we are ready for you." "Oh, okay. Ready for me for what?" "Until we are ready for you to join us." She started to leave, but then turned and said, "Mr. Crowley, come with me now." "Yes, I will come with you now." Then I heard Mr. Crowley climb out of bed, and his footsteps followed her out of the room. I lay there for some time, repeatedly looking back at the shadow in the corner of my room, wondering if it would attack me at any moment. But it didn't move. It didn't speak. It didn't even hiss. And I wondered if the doctor might, in fact, be dead. After some time, my vision cleared a little, and I could make out more than just raw shapes. I held my hand up in front of my eyes for a moment. Instead of blurry mittens, I was now able to see the outline of my fingers. "Come on, Jack, what are you supposed to do? Just lay here until these things take over your mind? Come on, get it together, man." "Hey, Doc," I asked, but no response came. "I say, hey, Doc." I called out a few more times, but when the doctor didn't move. I decided to get out of bed and see if that would get his attention. "Yo, Doc, you in there?" I fumbled my way around my bed and over toward the corner where the doctor was standing. He looked strange, almost webbed into the corner, and on top of his head was another pulsing creature. I leaned in closer to try and get a better look at it, and suddenly the thing hissed at me. I backed away and said, "So, I'm just gonna go over here and use the restroom if that's okay. I'll be right back, all right, Doc?" But there was no response. I backed away slowly until I reached the door to my room, and then I carefully opened it and peered out into the center part of the building. There were what looked to be makeshift cots in rows everywhere in a large gymnasium-style room. The cots were occupied, but I couldn't tell what was in them, although it looked an awful lot like bodies, draped with blankets. The gray shadows of everyone walking around in the giant room had one of the pulsing creatures on top of their heads. They all seemed to be working towards a common goal, and that goal was delivering every shadowy figure without a pulsing creature on their heads into a room. The entire spectacle was shocking to me. The people who didn't have the creatures on their heads seemed unable to see or even comprehend that something was wrong, and they mindlessly agreed to go into the room. When they let them out, they would all be wide-eyed and have a creature on top of their own head, pulsing away. Soon, I felt a strange breathing sound coming from behind me, so I quietly closed the door and turned around. The doctor was standing directly behind me. He was holding one of the creatures in his hands. He raised it to put it on top of my head. I was frozen with fear. I couldn't move as he lowered the shadowy spider-like creature down toward my skull. Suddenly, as he placed the creature on my head, it let out a terrible screeching cry of pain, and it fell to the floor. And the shadowy spider shriveled up as if it was dead. Then the doctor spoke as the creature moved his mouth up and down with its legs.
"You are contaminated. I will terminate
the hell?" I cried out and punched the creature on top of the doctor's head, but my hand disappeared through the creature as if it wasn't even there. "What the?" I spotted a mirror hanging on the wall beside the both of us. I glanced at it momentarily and wondered if my eyes were playing tricks on me. In the mirror, there was nothing on the doctor's head. I could only see it with my burned eyes. Instantly, I glanced down at the dead creature on the floor beside me and remembered. Without a second thought, I reached up and grabbed my hair. It was wet. The cleanser. Before I could think of a plan, the doctor wrapped his hands around my throat, and pushing me against the door, he began to choke me. I struggled with him for a brief moment, and reached up, and pulled out a handful of my own hair and quickly mashed it down onto the creature attached to his head. It let out a terrible scream with the doctor's mouth, loud enough that I was certain everyone in the building heard it. And the shadow spider shriveled up on the doctor's head, and the doctor fell to the floor, motionless, lifeless. I knew I had to move quickly, but my vision wasn't what I needed it to be for what I knew would come next. I could already hear the footsteps pounding their way toward my room, but I stumbled over the doctor's body and rolled across the floor next to my bed. I tried to pull myself up by the edge of the bed, but I kept slipping on something. "No, please, no!" I cried out. I finally got my footing, but just as I was about to pull myself up, I heard the sounds of many people speaking in that freakish monotone voice. They were struggling to get into my room, but thankfully the doctor's body was stuck in front of the door, preventing them from opening it all the way. Suddenly, I spotted the one thing that kept making my feet slip. They'd knocked over a bottle of something. A squeeze container of some sort. It had a pointy nozzle on it, and though my vision was blurry and I was unable to read what the contents were, my nose knew right away what was in the bottle. The cleanser. It's the cleanser. I grabbed the bottle of cleanser and quickly pulled myself up next to the bed. Feeling my way around the bed, I made my way over to where Mr. Crowley's bed was and next to the window. I couldn't see outside because the creatures had tied the blinds closed, but what I could tell was that it was daytime, by all the light leaking through the cracks in the blinds. "I'll jump if I have to." Wait, the fairgrounds. They don't have any two-level buildings. I just need something to smash the window and I can get out of here. All of a sudden, a group of mind-controlled freaks burst into my room. I could see the shadow of one tumble over the doctor's body, but the other ones made their way over toward me. Sadly, Brittany was one of them. "Oh, please, no, no. I'm so sorry, Brittany," I cried out as I pointed the bottle of cleanser at her face and squeezed. The creature on her head wailed in horror, and Brittany fell to the floor as her shadow spider curled up and fell from her head. I quickly hit the others with the cleanser, and the wailing shrieks of horror pierced my ears. Through the open door, I could see more people running toward my room, and every one of them had a shadow spider pulsing on the top of their heads. I stumbled my way to the door, falling over the bodies several times in the process, but managed to beat the group of people before they made it, and I pushed the doctor's body back against the door. Then I crawled across the floor and pushed 2 more bodies against the doctor's body. While the creature-controlled freaks pushed hard on the door, I made my way back to the window and took hold of a chair sitting next to Mr. Crowley's bed. I smashed the window out with it. It took several tries, and guess it's not as easy as it looks in the movies. After I smashed it out, I cleared the glass carefully so as not to injure myself. I still couldn't see well enough, and the glass was even more difficult to spot, especially now that the sunlight was blaring in my eyes. I placed my hands on the ledge of the window and psyched myself up mentally in preparation to blindly leap from the building. I was about to jump when I heard something groan behind me. "Jack!" I turned around. On the floor of my room, Brittany's hand was raised up. Help me, Jack. Brittany? Is it really you? Yes, it is. Oh, thank God you're safe. I thought that thing killed you, I said, helping her to her feet. What are you talking about, Jack? Look, I pointed to the floor. Those people, they all tried to kill me. You did too, Brittany. Can't you see those dead spider things on the floor? They were on their heads, on your head. What? But I don't understand. Jack, did you kill all those people? Brittany, I'm blind. How could a blind man kill all of those people? Look, I don't have time to explain right now, but I'm getting out of here. Can you check and see if it's safe for me to jump? I can't see what's down there. Brittany looked out the window. It's only a few feet to the ground, Jack. Maybe 3, maybe 4. But why? What's going on? I climbed out the ledge of the window. Are you coming or what? Brittany looked back at the door as the people began to push the bodies out of the way. Their voices sounded strange, and I could tell by the look on her face that she knew something wasn't right. Yeah, I'm coming, Jack. I jumped. Seconds later, Brittany jumped and grabbed me by the hand. She led me to her car, and we quickly sped out of the parking lot like we were fleeing from a tidal wave of death. When we reached my house, there were 2 cops standing outside, knocking on the door. They each had shadow spiders on their heads. Keep going, just go, I shouted. But maybe we should tell them what happened. No, you have to trust me on this, Brittany. Those cops, they have those things on their heads just like you did. The cops turned and looked at our car as we drove by, but continued to stand by the door of my house. We quickly passed my house and headed to Brittany's grandmother's, and I explained everything that had happened at the fairgrounds, although Brittany was reluctant to believe me at first. When we arrived at her grandmother's, we turned on the TV, and right away she could tell something was wrong. Every news anchor on all the channels sounded exactly the same, and although she couldn't see the pulsing shadow spiders resting on their heads as I could, she knew something was off. Then she told me where we could order the cleanser. I had her purchase a full truckload of it, with everything I had in my bank account, and 4 battery-powered water guns with backpack reservoirs. When the truck arrived, we stocked the garage full of it and waited in her grandmother's living room for the world to fall apart. If you're hearing this message, and you can somehow see the shadow spiders like I can, you're going to need as much cleanser as you can get your hands on. So write this down. The name of the cleanser you'll need is called